Hi, Nikki.
Hello.
It's been so much time. I think you have some amendments.
I do.
Share.
Katie McLean, Office of Legislative Counsel. Let me share my screen.
And I think, you know, the tenor of the conversations that I've heard thus far and that Katie has worked on are about making sure that as we put all of this money into the system, it is as sort of accountable as possible to both the needs of children and sort of the larger public good. And so that sort of like seems to be an overarching good shape to describe. Sorry, one more thing. And I asked Katie to share it as instances of amendment because I think it's easier for us to sort of do an initial like low by low that way. But again, we're gonna do a strike all before we put it up.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great, thank you. So just to sort of, I think you probably realize this, but at this point, this is our third committee report. So we're sort of amending two layers of committee reports. And I'm in my head, as I drafted this, assume, you know, that the House Education Amendment has been approved and that those have been integrated, and I'm amending what doesn't exist yet, but what would be sort of an integrated document with the House Human Services and House Education amendments. So first, in the first instance of amendment, this is amending the House Human Services Report, Section 5. Section 5, it relates to the Child Care Financial Assistance Program. And this, you know, this section contains language, for example, where we have the family expansion from the 350 to 550%. But in this particular subsection, we have language about family employment in order to receive services. So the sentence that this little phrase would be added on the end to, I'll read the whole sentence and what it would look like with this sentence included. The Child Care Financial Assistance Program is established to subsidize, to the extent the funds permit, the costs of child care for families that need child care services in order to obtain employment, to retain employment, or to obtain training leading to employment, including subsidizing care to the fullest extent necessary to ensure that families are able to meet their individualized professional goals.
And so I have promised Representative Sims that I would speak on her behalf. And she's not able to be here, I think because she actually has a childcare challenge. And I think she's done an adequate job speaking for herself up until this point, and everyone understands the problem that's trying to be solved, which is that various types of part-time employment or self-employed doesn't always qualify for full day care. There are a number of different ways we can solve this problem, and when we're sort of done going through the instances of amendment, I'm going to ask Sarah from Lisbrook to sort of offer a broader way we might want to solve this problem.
This is, though, the context of this is clearly aimed at speaking to the Department of Children and Families and how they're going to determine subsidy steps, right, or windows of eligibility.
This is in the section on CCFAP. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's the point. I mean, that's where the insertion of that flexibility is meant to go. Okay.
And so this is sort of part one of two parts of Representative Sims' amendments. So there's, I don't want to call it rulemaking, but consideration of policy language further down in the amendment. So the second instance of amendment is technical. Because we amend section 3512 twice at two different times in the bill. The first time we amend it in section 5, it's effective January 1, 2024. And the second time we amend it in section 5A is July 1, 2024. The second time section A1 appears in the bill, it will look different because at that point it is existing law having been adopted July 1, 2024. So this is a technical change to make sure we show the language as enacted of that date. Next is a third instance of amendment. This is a technical correction that came from Human Services. This is in the 6th in the sixth section of the bill, which pertains to provider rate adjustments for the Child Care Financial Assistance Program. This is sort of the big adjustment that occurs beginning January 1, 2024. The language that Human Services passed, the whole sentence reads, all providers in the same childcare setting category shall receive an identical reimbursement rate payment, which shall be dependent upon whether the provider operates a regulated childcare center and preschool program, regulated family childcare home, or after school and or summer care program. So removing identical. There was another place where it was also removed, and this is the second place where the committee had intended to remove the word identical, and it was still in there. So this is a change to correct that.
I make a suggestion on that previous one.
The second instance?
Yes, that,
So on that one, we're actually gonna have like 3 different choices to choose from, so I wonder if it'd be helpful to see all 3 choices before. But go for it.
I just don't like families with individualized professional goals.
I think that was Representative Sims' language, and she's not here. But there are gonna be other options for that section. I also find it slightly off from what you pointed out.
That's, yeah. I mean, family members are able to meet their goals, their professional goals.
Oh, okay. The idea of professional goals was actually what I found slightly uncomfortable, not the drafting. But we're gonna look at other ways to skin that cat here, so.
Okay.
Okay.
So we were on the fourth instance of amendment. The fourth instance of amendment has to do with the readiness payments. To remind you, the readiness payments is the roughly 18 million that goes out the door July 1, 2023 in preparation for the rate adjustment that happens on January 1, 24. Within this section, there's a list and it says readiness payments may be used for the following. And we have a list. So this adds a new subdivision to the list, which is addressing gaps in services and expanding capacity. Doesn't remove any items on the list, it just adds that one. And then we're relettering the remaining items on the list to be correct. Next, the fifth instance of amendment is striking out sections 12 and 12A of the Human Services report and inserting instead sections 12, 12A, and 12B. This sounds like we're removing Human Services language, but what we are doing to their language is amending it or renumbering it, and then you're also adding some brand new language. So I tried to sort of highlight to show you what was Human Services and what you're adding. So first we have this childcare tuition rates. In subsection A, you're specifying that it's a regulated childcare provider who shall not impose an increase on annual childcare tuition that exceeds 1.5 times the most recent annual increase in the NAICS code. And then you have new language that's being added or proposed potentially by this committee in subsection B. And that is that a childcare provider participating in CCFAP shall not charge any family a tuition rate that exceeds the total amount of the child care provider receives for providing childcare services to a child enrolled in CCFAP. And as used in this subsection, total amount means the amount a child care provider is reimbursed under the provider rate reimbursement formula plus the family's copayment. That gives you the total cost. And then we have a new section, which would be 3518, about a child care provider ownership disclosure. So we have some definition sections. Affiliate means a person that directly or indirectly owns or controls, is owned or controlled by, or is under common ownership or control with another person.
And David helped with the drafting.
Yes, he did.
Based on the conversations. Yes. Great.
We have an applicant means a person that applies to be eligible to receive state funding for childcare services pursuant to a provider rate agreement. Controls or is controlled by or is under common control means the power to direct or cause the direction or management and policies of a person, whether through the direct or beneficial ownership of voting securities by contract or otherwise, a person who directly or beneficially owns 10% or more equity interest or the equivalent thereof of another person shall be deemed to control the person. Owner means a person who controls an applicant. Principal means one of the following: the president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, manager, or similar officer of a corporation, a nonprofit corporation, mutual benefit enterprise, cooperative as provided for, or a worker cooperative corporation. Could be a director of a corporation, a nonprofit corporation, mutual benefit enterprise, cooperative, worker cooperative corporation, member of a member managed limited liability company, manager of a manager managed limited liability company, partner of a partnership, or general partner of a limited partnership. And then we have the actual disclosure language now that we have all these defined terms. So the department is to adopt procedures to require each applicant to disclose prior to entering a provider rate agreement, the type of business organization of the applicant, the identity of the applicant's owners and principals, and the identity of the owners and principals of the applicant's affiliates. So that is the disclosure that happens at the time when there is that provider rate agreement between the department and the provider who's going to be serving a child who is receiving a subsidy.
I understand that part, and I wonder, are we going to also say anything about how the funds are used? In
Which funds?
so when the child care provider receives help, CCFAP, so if they decide, yes, we'll be part of this. Then are we going to ask them how they're allocating, what their budgets look like?
There's an amendment later on about salaries for paid employees, but this is just about
That's
disclosure
what-
of ownership.
Okay. Thank you.
Is this very similar to the cannabis?
Can't tell you. I'll have to ask David.
Is this separate?
Not a secret. Not a secret.
Does anybody, do we,
My understanding is yes, that's what David was.
it's not more extensive or
It's
less?
it's slightly less extensive because, as David said yesterday, under the cannabis, we were also concerned about illegal actors. And we're not really concerned about illegal actors. We're more concerned with just sort of understanding profit motive.
Okay, section 12B, as I said, this was human services language. You're not changing the language, you're renumbering the section designation. And then we have a rulemaking section. This is in the underlying human services amendment. There's some technical changes that are happening. So we're correcting some of the terminology as to what the director terms are. So for a child center-based program, it's program director, and for a family child care home, it's a family child care provider. So we're clarifying those terms. We're also making a correction because I had the after-school rule instead of the family child care home rule referenced in this list. This is technical from Human Services, yep. So that correction is here, yeah. That's part of that was one of the items on the list from Human Services. And then we have part 2 of Representative Sims' proposal. So you'll see that Human Services was already asking the department to consider amending a rule. So now we're just borrowing that lead-in language and adding a new subdivision to accommodate Representative Sims' request. So the department shall review and consider amending its eligibility policies addressing self-employment to provide consistency with research on best practices in the field to maximize participation in the program.
Does this mean that a parent or caregiver at home would maximize their participation in CCFAP? Talking about?
So the conversation, was it yesterday or 2 days ago? Was about occasionally families not being able to get all of the hours that they need. So this is hoping to address the fact that families could take advantage of all of the hours that they need through for subsidized care.
I'm not
Like,
following.
what are you, I guess, what participation in the programs for the end of that sentence, is that families' participation in the CCFAP program?
Yes.
I thought I asked that, but I didn't ask it very well, I guess. But I guess I don't understand. So then you said if a family can't make use of all those hours or can't book the hours, or I don't understand that.
My understanding is it sounds like depending on the income of the family last year and the hours worked of the family last year, that they're not always able to get a subsidy for all the hours that they need to work in the current moment. And so the idea is to look at the policies, to ask the department to look at the policies to make sure that families can obtain a subsidy for all of the hours that they want to work.
I almost get it. So if you're a person and it's January 1st, well, no. Well, what day it would be, but when, I'm just, just tell a story of what happens. A person wakes up one day and says, I'm going to take a job. And what day of the year is it? And when does CCFAP put in?
So one of the examples that was given, and I apologize, I don't know who said this, who gave this example, but if you're self-employed and you make a big purchase for your business in one year, and it sort of appears that you're operating at a loss, then when you're trying to apply to get subsidized hours the following year, potentially there could be a challenge for you to obtain those hours because it appears that you maybe weren't working, or you were, working, your family wasn't, you as a parent weren't getting an income in the previous year. I hope I'm explaining that correctly.
I think, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I was just gonna say, I think it was based on Rep. Sims' analogy of show a loss one year, and it's based on when they calculate your hours on a minimum wage. And if it comes out to be that you worked 4 hours last year, but in reality, it's just because of your taxes, like say you depreciated a large asset and then you showed that you made $1,000 last year, and it might show up that you worked very few hours, therefore your subsidy would be altered that you don't need that much care because you only work 4 hours a week.
And so it's not about financial eligibility for the program, it's that your for self-employed people, your financial eligibility looks like your time eligibility, basically.
Right.
Like your income is how you hypothetically prove that you're working those hours in order to be eligible for the number of hours that you're eligible for. And we have some more scenarios for ways to sort of get at this problem that we're gonna look at with Sarah Kenny in a little bit. So we'll like dive deeper on it. Okay, great, thanks. Okay.
So the seventh instance of amendment is we're striking out the underlying section 5 in the Human Services Report. This was a report from JFO on the pay scale and from Ledge Council on whether the pay scale can be imposed on private childcare providers. So that has been deleted. And you'll see there's sort of a corresponding addition of creating a pay scale at the end of this amendment. The eighth instance of amendment amends the House Education Report. So they had a section 17, the after-school language. Their 17A created positions related to the after-school language. And then we were repealing language that corresponded with the creation of a special fund. So those 3 provisions are deleted in this amendment.
Because again, not because we're doing anything to after school, just because it's gonna live in the budget, so.
Section 21 of the bill has to do with technical assistance. This is a correction. This is a technical correction. So this language lives in the Green Book's ongoing law. It had originally been in session law in one version of the bill, and when the jump happened to move this language into the Green Books, the language still referred to this act, which we don't do in the Green Books. So this F removes that language. So the language in the Human Services Committee report is the impact of this act on a mixed delivery system for pre-K, childcare, and after-school and summer care. And the proposed amendment is the impact of expanded childcare, pre-K, and after-school and summer care on a mixed delivery system. So it's trying to sort of collect the same information, but say it a different way. And then we have language that Damien wrote with regard to the childcare provider wages. I can read through it, but I can't really answer questions on it. So we have that a center-based childcare provider program shall not employ a program director or teacher at a rate of less than $24.05. So I should say this is sort of obviously setting a floor. So we have the first paragraph on center-based, and then we have another paragraph on family childcare homes. A teacher associate at a rate not less than $20.45. A teacher assistant at a rate not less than $19.25, or a classroom aide, trainee, or substitute at a rate of less than $16.65. Then we have in subsection B, our family childcare home language. So we are not employing a family childcare provider at a rate less than $19.25, or family childcare assistant, classroom aide, trainee, or substitute at a rate of less than $16.65. Beginning on January 1st of 2025 and on each subsequent January, the minimum wage rates that are set forth up above shall be increased at the percentage increase in the average NAICS code, not to exceed 5%, but in no event shall the minimum wage be decreased. The division shall publish the rates for the next calendar year on or before November 15th of each year. The minimum wage rates set forth in A and B shall be rounded off to the nearest cent. If the minimum wage rate established by the U.S. government is greater than the rate established pursuant to A or B, the minimum wage rate for the affected position during that year shall be the greater of the rate established by the U.S. government and the rate established by this language.
And so Damien and Joyce pulled these numbers from the RAND study, which was based on a whole lot of work that's happened in the field in the last decade to professionalize the field, and it was like a deeply consensual field-driven exercise. I think there are questions that we should make sure we're answering about sort of the timeline of this and that the implementation date is not too soon. But it was to answer everyone's concerns that the revenue would be going into wages as that was the intent. We want to make sure that programs are ready to be paying these wages and that we have the right implementation date.
I think one of the things that we hear from childcare providers is not just that the wages are low, but there are no benefits. And so I wonder if we provide some flexibility in this section of allowing for a slightly lower wage rate if the provider is using that money to provide benefits.
So Damien's testimony, I think, had something, he said something about that, but I don't remember what it was. So we can check in with him about that. Will you check in with him about that? Sure, thanks. Yes.
Here's what I want to say. I was thinking about exactly that. And you're forcing with this idea, it's a forced pay of wages when somebody might really prefer, if you look at total compensation, they might prefer a benefits package of, the money to be spent on healthcare for their family, not on wages. In fact, I was at an event over by Building Bright Futures across the way last year, and somebody who was interviewing for jobs said she wanted the medical benefits. She didn't care about the wages. So I'm wondering if instead of approaching it this way, or think about this, we could say percentage of total, whatever it is, would be spent on employees. So then the employee has choice and the employer, maybe, they discuss it with each other, whatever, but
So in previous committee discussions on this one, the RAND study doesn't necessarily have the information to do that, but there's also been a conversation around when that happens, those wages can be going entirely to the director and not to the director, not to the line staff. And so that's why we were sort of very specifically Damien very specifically matched this up with the categories and the wages in the RAND study. And it's a floor, not a ceiling, so benefits can certainly be offered on top of this.
could a person with that, at that level, or could we say that a person with that level of pay per hour could, as long as that much is allocated to them, they could choose whether to take it in that pay or whether to take it in the benefit?
I don't know, that's what Juliet's going to say again, but I think probably that breaks the code that we have struck with Damien.
Yeah, I
But we'll ask him.
I'll defer to Julia's conversation, but Damien was crystal clear that being prescriptive beyond setting a minimum was no person's territory to go. And I agree with the chair. If you set a floor and somebody can say, I'll take the benefits and not the money above the floor, that's cool. That's between the two of them. But being prescriptive is off the table.
So let's
Anyway.
finish going through this with Katie, because she has other committee she has to do. And so that was a little bit of exaggeration, I made it scary, I'm so sorry. And then we can come back to this when we get more feedback from Damien.
Okay, so this subsection D just defines all of these different positions because they're all in DCF rules. Each position is defined and described with the educational experience kind of required to hold each of these positions. So we have a page or so of these definitions cross-referencing the rules. Okay, and then we have an effective date section. I've struck it just for clarity and added new language in. So in terms of our January 1, 2024 date, section 12, which is where we have our childcare tuition rates, would take effect January 1, 2024. And the new childcare provider wages that we looked at would also take effect January 1, 2024, as this is drafted. And that's it.
Let's focus on questions for Katie specifically, because she needs to know.
Anyone discuss offering Vermont State Employees Association addition of these employees across the state to that for their medical care, for their health insurance? Sorry.
Like in other committees. No, this is the first time that we've seen a pay scale drafted as in this draft. There was, I should say, there have been so many versions of this bill that have floated around the building. There have been versions, particularly in Senate Health and Welfare, that didn't create the pay scale, but directed others to create a pay scale. And at least at one point in time, there was a conversation about our benefits are out in creating this pay scale. But that is sort of the extent to our recollection on that.
Is there's still language about studying pay scale?
No.
Did we take that out?
You took it out.
Okay, yeah. So I think we could also add something like, this is what stands while people study to see if something better should stand. Taylor and that.
Are those descriptions or the names of can you scroll up a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
Are those consistent with certification names?
Yes, so these are all cross-referencing DCF's rules. DCF's rules defines each of these titles, each of these provider types, and has all of the credentialing required to hold each provider type. That's why we're cross-referencing.
Represent that?
That's the same meaning.
Oh. She's right.
That's okay, I'm trying to capture the pay scale that it's here until we think, have something better.
Yeah.
So temporarily here. Okay.
Assuming Human Services Amendment passes, or Education Amendment passes, our amendment passes, how many studies do we have total?
Well, I can answer that. So you have the pre-K implementation study that is still here.
That's not a legislative study, right? It's
Oh, there's no, yeah, but it is a study. And then, let's see. You have a report on background checks. You took out the provider compensation, so that is gone. You have a plan on special accommodation grants. And then you have two corresponding plans on, like the leadership of AOE and reorganizing DCF.
So plans, reports, studies.
In terms of a work group though, like well, that's the one we already mentioned. That's the pre-K.
Okay.
So there's only one sort of big work group and the other are either developing a plan or coming up with a report.
Okay.
And the plans are the administration being asked to create a plan on something that hasn't been studied in the past.
Yes, so for example, Act 45 looked at governance of the childcare system, and then we have a plan specific to AOE, we're requesting a plan specific to AOE and to DCF to look at how to reorganize leadership or the department to elevate childcare.
Which is sort of responsive to the previous report. Thank you. Anything else for Katie? Thank you. I think it took us the call, it's very good.
Quick transition.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Katie, I see you have drafts in multiple colors there. We'll have to add another color. Appreciate it.
Just you wait.
Oh, boy.
Good work. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
So Julia's understand that he's with Damien, or Abby's drafting language on the taxes for tomorrow. Work needs to be done on the weights. Are there other things outstanding? Yeah.
Does now that I'm learning about the hours of kindergarten, does that play into the weights conversation?
So,
Okay. 'Cause
do you think so?
I would like it to.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree.
I'm bewildered by that.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes,
I keep reading that childcares are closing.
indeed.
And I'm wondering if we want to think about some kind of, it's like as they did in the house agriculture, some kind of emergency help, so we don't lose more of those.
So we are already paying out an enormous amount of emergency help, and the administration has taken a bit of time to get that money out the door, but we've been sending it out the door for about a year and a half. And so there's a lot of money appropriated for that. 3 years? 3 years. There's a lot of money appropriated for it, and then there's much more money in this bill in just for FY24 to continue to build the system at capacity. And there are capacity grants that are in the budget but not in this bill because they are in existing statutes. And we're adding more capacity grants in this bill in FY24 with some of it that's going to carry over into FY25 into the future. So there's like emergency grants and capacity grants and federal money that's all flowing. And some of it is described as payments, not grants, in an effort to get it out the door faster. And so one thing that I want to make sure we clarify with the department before this leaves is that the payments are indeed going to sort of be administered in a way that is more efficient than a grant would be.
So if we have people who are in trouble right now, we should ask them to do what?
They should talk to CDD because there's a whole lot of money available for them.
Okay.
May I approach them yet discussed issue, or should I wait till tomorrow?
No, do it, let's do it. Broach away.
I am concerned that we got a study in 2022 that says that the system is fundamentally broken, and it's because there isn't leadership in each of the, that just focuses on this issue at each agency involved.
We actually got a report that says that already.
You know, that's what I said.
Okay,
That
okay, that we got that.
that
Yes,
report-
Yes.
I think it was clear in what it asks us to do. I think what I've learned is that AOE doesn't feel like they have the structure in place right now to address that. And we've asked AOE to study that issue and come back with a recommendation. So their recommendation is due November of 2025, which means that they will not have structurally fixed that problem until arguably 2026. And I'm wondering if the committee wants to consider the possibility of compelling them to put at least some sort of stopgap measure, like hire a consultant that reports directly to the commissioner or whatever the proper level is, to sort of at least make progress forward in the next 3 years.
Let's talk to the Human Services Committee about this, because I bet they spent an enormous amount of time after that. And I know that many of them are here right now, but I'm not actually asking them to comment on it right now. Yep. Anything else, and then we're gonna actually ask Sarah Kenny to come up and talk through Representative Sims. Representative Sims has somewhat beaten a dead horse very effectively on the issue of self-employment and how that works for eligibility, but I think it broached a larger topic that Sarah's had a chance to dive into for us. So we have something up on our memo from her up on our page.
Thank you and hello. Sarah Kenny, Chief Policy Officer for Let's Grow Kids. It's very nice to be back with you all. And when the chair says I have done a deep dive, it's like in the past 8 hours, a deep dive. So as deep as one can go in that span of time. But, and I think I will preface this by saying that I think what we have in our memo actually builds on the language that Katie has in the draft related to self-employment. What we have here doesn't have anything specific to self-employment because it seemed like that was moving forward. So I think that is also an important issue to address. And I think the language that is in the draft before you gets at that pretty effectively with some wordsmithing, as you all were identifying, to make sure that it's linked to the individual family members as opposed to the family. We have for a long time at Let's Grow Kids heard from families who are not eligible for CCFAP because remember that the program at its core relies on federal funding, and that federal funding comes with a lot of strings, right? That you have to have a service need in order to qualify for CCFAP. So you have to have a work need or a health-related need. So employment, health, and some other pieces that are currently restrict people's access. So this morning, I hopped on the phone with a couple of eligibility specialists who work in the community child care support agencies, which you've heard about. And so these are the folks who are contracted by the state to actually do the eligibility determination for CCFAP with families who are applying. And I said, this issue is coming up. I should back up and say that the bill, as introduced in both the House and the Senate, removed all of those work, education, and health requirements from qualification for CCFAP. It just said we're just going to base this exclusively on income. And that was in the Senate bill up until the last moments when the Child Development Division or DCF came in and said, small problem, we have heard from our federal partners that just blatantly like blanket lifting all of those restrictions might jeopardize our federal block grant, which we do not want to do, right? We want the federal funds to continue to flow to support this program. So that language was just stricken. And since then, we've been trying to figure out how can we, at least for now, how can we figure out how to scoop in as many of those families who are missing because of, it's almost like technicalities. It's not really technicalities, but all the families who are not being able to access the program right now. And then how can we also, in this bill, ask DCF to take a look at how could we actually lift as many of the work, education, and health requirements as we can in the future so that we're really looking at a system that's just based on your income eligibility and is taking a more universal approach. So you'll see in the memo before you that what we're suggesting is that you, similarly to what's in the draft that Katie just walked you through, that DCF amend their regulations. She has more, they may, and we're suggesting you tell them that they should.
Can you talk about some more scenarios where someone might like fall through the cracks?
Sure, yeah. So, and that's what's laid out in the list of pieces I have here is essentially, these are some of the scenarios that I heard about from the eligibility specialists this morning that we're trying to capture here. So, amending the employment service need to allow a primary caretaker who may be involved in an activity that's exempt from hourly compensation. So like agricultural workers or other folks who may not be getting specific hourly compensation, to make sure that they can just demonstrate that they're receiving wages and not demonstrate that they're receiving wages equivalent to a minimum wage. And this is a pretty technical piece that some agricultural workers are not being allowed access.
It would actually also might help for the self-employed workers too.
Yeah.
Or,
Right.
what are the Tupperware party? Sometimes we call them-
Multi-level marketing.
Yes, for folks doing multi-level marketing. That would also help. And I know a lot of moms
Yeah.
who do that as a way to try to like start working again. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So the second piece we have in here is the training and education service need that's in the rules right now. Does not include second bachelor's degrees or post-secondary, postgraduate rather degrees, so master's degrees. Medical students are ineligible for CCFAP, so it's just expanding the definition of what training and education can look like to include more folks who are pursuing advanced degrees. Creating a new established service need for families receiving refugee resettlement services. And some of these folks might be captured in the non-citizen language that's already in the bill.
I
But
offer when I was in graduate school, I fell into this category. I did welfare before that. I went to grad school to like get off welfare even though I had a bachelor's degree, and it was wild and outrageous to me that somehow like me crawling out of poverty as a single mom.
Right. Because you were doing a master's degree instead of a bachelor's degree. Yeah, yeah. That's long been a thorn in many of our sides. And we do hear periodically from medical students who are single moms trying to go to medical school, or other folks trying to go to medical school who are making, nothing. They're like going into debt and are not eligible for support from CCFAP. So this next one is around families receiving refugee resettlement services, to just allow the commissioner to allow them to have benefits for a year, regardless of having to establish any other service needs like work requirements or anything else. The next one is families who are adopting a child through the foster care system. I heard a couple of scenarios this morning from the eligibility determination. So when you are fostering a child who is in DCF custody and there's an active case, then the state DCF automatically pays you're automatically qualified for child care financial assistance with no copay. So DCF sort of processes it that way. Once the case is resolved though, and the child is adopted, or the case is resolved in their in ongoing custody of the family, then they have to meet service needs. And so we're recommending that you just say, if they adopt from the foster system, they automatically are supported by DCF through CCFAP. So looping those families in. The next one, we were hearing from the eligibility specialists, we have so many grandparents and other family members who are fostering and then adopting and caring for children of their children right now, or other, children who are from family members. And so we are recommending that those folks be automatically qualified to not have to establish a service need, especially if you have grandparents who are caring for their grandkids. They're often retired. And so they can't demonstrate that they are working full time, or so they're the eligibility specialists are trying to help people find loopholes, but we think they should just be qualified automatically and not have to demonstrate that service need. Similarly, if you have a parent who's a primary caretaker for a child in the family or another close relative. So I heard about a family this morning who they have one parent who works full time, the other parent cares full time for their adult child who requires 24/7 care, and they have a young child. And because one parent is technically home all day, providing full-time care for this adult child, they don't qualify for CCFAP because there's technically a parent home to care for that child during the day. That seems silly, and so they should automatically be qualified, we would say. And then you heard from, oh no, this is different, sorry. So expanding the seeking employment service need. So right now you can qualify if you are employed or if you are seeking employment, but if you are seeking employment, the statute says you have to reapply every 12 weeks, which I think originally was intended to make sure people are continuing to apply for jobs. But what we have heard is that that creates a really big hurdle for people who are seeking employment, that they have to every 3 months go back in and reapply for CCFAP, which creates a level of uncertainty as you're trying to apply for a job, but you're not sure if you're going to be able to actually afford childcare next month. So we're suggesting that you extend that at least to only having to apply every 6 months. And then
And that's part of the federal requirement? That's why it found its way in?
I honestly don't know where that comes from. It's in the state statute. So, and I don't know if that comes from the federal requirement.
It sounds like unemployment related.
Exactly.
Like somebody who wrote the one book wrote the other one.
Yes, exactly. And I should say that we're recommending that you ask DCF to do this because we would want it to happen in a way that does not potentially jeopardize our federal funds.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, but there are places like the children in foster care right now, the state just pays for that out of all state funds. So there are places where we've already expanded beyond what the federal government allows and just use only state dollars to pay for those categories.
And I don't think we could have done any of this easily if we were still existing under sort of previous statute and previous revenue available for this. But given that the majority of the system is now going to be like serious majority of the system will be state dollars and not federal dollars, we could, money can be if needed.
Move to comply.
And we do that all the time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, so reading over and what we just said, so this is basically recommendations. This isn't language that they're gonna, they'll write the language, DCF will write the language.
yes, exactly. Because this is all in a rule and not a statute. So we're recommending that you ask them to amend their rules to include.
To reflect that.
Yeah.
Awesome, okay. Reflect that.
Yeah. And then we also have a suggestion on page 2, which is asking the department in consultation with Building Bright Futures to bring you an implementation plan to essentially move toward an eligibility system that's based solely on income. It could be a study if you prefer, but yeah.
I think it's really important that when we are making these really like incredible investments and powerful changes to make sure that the system works well.
Exactly.
We are making sure we're checking that, make sure you're doing it right as well. But I appreciate you doing it.
Yeah, we want to make sure that it works. And we want to make sure that these significant investments are actually reaching the families who you intend for it to reach. So I would hate for us to have all this investment going into CCFAP and it only reaching a fraction of the families who you want it to reach because they have to meet these other service need requirements, right? Like we've been focused so much on income eligibility, and that's a really important part of the conversation. We don't want to preclude people from ever even getting considered for the income eligibility because they're not technically qualified under one of these other service requirements. So,
Thanks.
yeah.
Other things you want to share with us about?
Well, I was just going to say that I just moments ago saw the wage scale in the new draft for the first time, which is great to see. I'm happy that you all are thinking about how to act more immediately on ensuring that these funds go out to the folks working in childcare programs where you intend them to. I have not had time to digest all of them yet, and I appreciate that it sounds like it's a starting place in terms of that scale. One thing that popped out is that there are differentiated rates for family childcare homes and for center-based programs, and the family childcare home rate was like the lowest possible rate. I think I talked to you all about the group that's been leading the Advancing as a Profession work, which you referenced, Madam Chair. And so they have actually created some recommendations for minimum compensation scales, and that is what the RAND report based their estimates on. And that recommendation actually recommends that we do away with any distinction between family childcare homes and centers in terms of the wage requirements for folks in those positions, because people running a family childcare home are often working just as hard as people working in a childcare center, as Representative Andrews has indicated, and often actually have higher true cost of care when you look at all of the components that they're managing on their own. So we would recommend making sure that there's alignment there. And I can share with the committee there's like a PowerPoint presentation that the Advancing as a Profession folks put together around minimum compensation standards and what they recommend in case it's helpful for you all in that deliberation. It's a little tricky because that work is moving forward on a slightly different timeline than what's in this draft right now. They're working towards new designations within a profession of early childhood education. And that won't be ready for legislative action to create the new profession until probably the 2025 legislative session. So at that point, you would want to align pay scales with those 3 designations. And that's what the work of the Advancing as a Profession group is built on.
And I think it might make sense for us to sort of be lining this up, setting the right effective date and referencing that this will be updated at that date when that new.
Yeah.
I think that would be wonderful. And I think the folks working on that project would be really happy to see that reflected in the bill, that work, that we intend to honor their work and move it forward in that way.
Representative Anthony.
Just back to the argument that there should be no differential between home care and center. Did that distinction, you think, arise owing to the distinction between registered and licensed?
I don't actually know the answer to that. I think historically, family childcare home care has been much more affordable for families because I think historically it was often a person, most often a mom, who had a partner who was employed and typically brought home benefits. So it was somebody who often had a young child and decided to open up a family childcare home and take in some other children. And so I think they could do it more affordably than somebody who's running a whole center with, all of the overhead and staffing and everything. That has shifted over the years though. So I want to recognize their
that classic is a sole proprietorship and these are focused on employee minimums.
Right.
If you have no
yes,
employees,
exactly. Yeah.
It's irrelevant.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
The reason I asked registered versus licensed.
It's a great question.
Is there other expectations that go with those 2 words? Not just the type of employee that you.
There are for family childcare homes, there are registered homes and licensed homes. And when you have a licensed home, then you can have employees who work for you. So it's a great question, Representative Anthony. And at DCF on all of these things, DCF is more, on the rules governing CCFAP eligibility on this question. I think DCF is will have a more technical answer for you than I.
And Damien actually used registered really explicitly because of committee concerns around, some members of the committee around sort of a separate shadow market that might set wages lower and not accepting as CCFAP. And so that we would create we don't want to create a situation where our sort of well-intentioned policy work actually creates a further divide between sort of high quality care that for families who are not on CCFAP.
Yeah.
So that was sort of why Damien.
Those numbers, the lower wage or the lower skilled employees of both types, the same wage as 65 an hour. You go up from there and then you get to the family child care provider is $19.25, which is the same as the teacher assistant rate. But then when you get up to the teacher associate and the program director, that's where the larger numbers are. Mm-hmm. I think figuring out some parity with those numbers and the home care. And the home care operator is probably going to be a sole proprietor.
I would assume so.
Mm-hmm. And so they're going to be able to decide whatever they want. Mm-hmm. But I think taking a look at that sort of mid-range might make some sense. But
yeah.
I'm happy to see that the bottom range is the same at both programs. And the next tier up is the same for both programs.
Thank you very much, Sarah.
Thank you all very much. Thanks for your good work.
I think sort of more conversations need to happen with stakeholders, but this sort of more expansive program eligibility versus Representative Sims' very, very narrow program eligibility. Does anyone have an opinion about that? So the Representative Sims language that Katie shared with us, like basically solved this single problem that Representative Sims has been bringing to us. And this solves the problem for more people, but is sort of a bigger, it's a little bit of a bigger project to take on.
I think broader is better. I mean, it's by definition more flexible. It includes instances that Representative Sims had not anticipated.
And I would say I echo your assertion there, and echoing what Rep. Maslin said earlier, we need to remember that the goal of this bill is to focus on children and what their needs are, not what's expedient for us as their community.
We ought to be looking at, I mean, I agree, Representative Andrews, and agree with what Representative Maslin said. I think trying to find that place where we can expand a bit eligibility as much as possible without getting in trouble with our federal partners is the sweet spot. And so figuring out where that is, but that may take a bunch more time than we have. Sure.
Do a report?
Well, there's a report in the language that Sarah provided a second.
Representative Bodie.
I wonder, I'm gonna ask you this question, Sarah. We're talking about salaries and benefits, and then we know there'll be costs for lights and electricity, heat, whatever. But is there anything in the report about curriculum materials and what percentage of total budget, a center or a home care should be allocated to that?
I don't know the percent specific to curriculum, but the answer is yes. So you'll remember that the RAND report, the financing study, estimated the true cost of care, and that what you're doing in S56 right now, the proposal is to move sort of halfway toward the true cost of care in terms of the reimbursement rates. And when RAND looked at what is that true cost of care, it includes, yes, the wages and some level of benefits, but it also includes all the other components of a high quality program. So nutrition, curriculum, materials, the space, all of those, all the pieces that are required to run the quality.
Yeah, I probably didn't ask it correctly again, but considering that, what can we do to protect where funds should be allocated to get to that high cost of care, from the correct cost of care, high quality care, rather than have it be something where, oh, well, wasn't enough money for that, let's have a bake sale.
Well, I think that, and Joyce can will come in again, but the grant study's cost of care calculation, so the cost of care calculation for the grant study, sort of where we're setting the reimbursements to centers on, and the pay scale is also from the RAND study, and so the difference between those two things is sort of what centers would have to do all the rest of it. So that part is already been calculated into the numbers that we're working on.
All right, I should be even more specific. If you've got somebody coming in with how is the decision made? How much will be just taken in as profit, and how much will be used on what makes up that high quality care? I mean, that we're focused on, let's protect the employee, pay, because we want pay to go to employees. Let's protect accessibility and affordability. But for quality, how could we do something similar to what we're doing for employee pay with all the things that are curricularly make it a high quality program?
So I think Damien shared that like there's only so much we can direct in terms of spending with that statute. And sort of, I would say that probably doesn't fall within how Damien would describe how much we can direct spending. But we do have this whole quality system that CDD goes out and.
You mean stars?
Yeah, we're moving, not reimbursing based on stars, right? Yes, like above and beyond stars. There's like a fairly comprehensive quality system that would include looking at curriculum and looking at what happens in the classroom and looking at facilities and all those things. So there is there is measures for that.
All right, well, last question. I thought Damien was talking about pay and Labor Relations Act, but I didn't think he talked about the
I would recommend you follow up with Jessica after we're done, because she's a lot of tell you. But she will tell you after we're done, she'll tell you after we're done. Okay, Representative Taylor.
We have, with regard to CCFAP, we have two things going on in terms of whether a person gets it. One is means testing and the other is the profession, whether you're seeking work and things like that. And we've kind of, in these amendments, we've kind of bolstering or refining the side that says for seeking employment. Is the goal to get away from means testing?
No, I don't. I mean, I think eventually, so I think you always have to go through the 2 gates to get access to CCFAP. You have to walk first through the gate that says, I am going to spend my time in a way that the state sees fit. That's what we're shifting here in the amendment that Sarah just shared with us. And then you have to walk through the next gate. I'm like totally justifying, I'm sorry. Then we have to walk through the next gate, and that next gate is, are you financially eligible? I think, we are moving the means testing to be more expansive, right? That's what the sawtooth, what does Trace call it?
Yeah.
Sawtooth graphics, yep. And, to go to 100%, we'd be expanding that sawtooth up past the curve. And so if we got to 100% of the RAND recommendations in, say, FY 29 or FY 30, we would be expanding means testing, but I think the only way we would be doing away with means testing is if we move the entire thing into the public school system, which no one's talking about right now.
Right, but when we're doing one, like with the idea of the grandparents taking care of their kid. So that would mean that they qualify.
They still have to means test.
But the grandparents, well, I haven't looked into what's considered income yet. Okay.
The grandparents would still have to means test, yes.
Yeah, I don't know whether dividend income and things like that are considered income, so I'll have to look into that. Okay.
Okay, I think, team, it is 4:45. We're gonna wrap for the day. Reminders about tomorrow. We are meeting here at 9. And then we're gonna come back to this bill after the floor. And then we have testimony after lunch. I'm just gonna keep on saying it. And then we actually have the floor at 2. And so every day until the session ends, we're gonna have floor at 10 and 2. Is that in the morning and afternoon? Okay, I don't know. Tomorrow it's 2. I don't know what it is. Okay, fine. We have to email that. But yeah. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
Can you end it?
Okay, cool.